I figured, aha, this move here is weak. So I'll just hold one finger here. That's the move that ain't working. Pull it out and isolate it. That's the spark plug that isn't firing. Pull it out and re-gap it, I guess. I don't know, whatever you do to spark plug to make it work. Or replace it. Can't replace your finger, so just do this. So I'll isolate the muscles of the area I'm having trouble with. Now, after I do all those exercises, going back to the lick again, it starts to smooth up for me a little bit. It feels a little bit better. As I'm talking, I'm getting, my warm-up is dropping out, so it's difficult for me to play sometimes, but I notice that's good though, because it shows me what parts I need to work on. Then as I do those exercises and go back to the lick, I do notice that it is smoother and it works better for me. And again, using that in music is a whole other story. This is just basically an overview on what I'll do when I take a lick or a run or a bunch of moves and play them across the bass and then start to troubleshoot. What's going on? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it happening? Now the right hand is a whole different story. Basically, now, I'm not sure, sometimes it's difficult for me to play that actual sequence without that going in my mind. It's hard to do. So sometimes what I'll just do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, back and forth across this strings ad nauseum. Again, it's not pleasant, it's not music, it's not fun, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, but these component things, when I work on them, they do help my playing a lot. See, I'm catching there a little bit, so I know that's the area I have to work. So let's just isolate just the E string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And instead of just working the E string alone, I'll go to the A and back and forth, because it's the transition when you jump from one string to another that you're getting having a problem with. So I'll do the transition. Then I'll really throw myself a curve and do a transition to jump a string. That makes my hand, I have to lift up to get my fingers up over to that with a lot more strength than I have to just go to the A string. So now when I go to the A string, in theory, it should be even easier. You see it's starting to smooth out a little bit. It'll be a little bit better than when I first went at it and was clickety-clacky and made a lot of mistakes. So now, after having done both those exercises with both hands, putting them together as a component part, it should may not sound like it to you, but to me it feels more comfortable, it's smoother. Now, just to expand on that, you can now go to different patterns. Here we're doing that pattern. Go to I think that's it. Oh, sorry. That's a note, not that. After a while, you get to a point where you'll train your ears to hear when you make a mistake rather than to watch your fingers. So, you know, that's not the right note. That's the right note. After a while, you begin to hear these cascading notes go by, and the chords that they make, and the sound that they make, and the tonality of it, you'll be able to tell by your ears where you're making a mistake, which is really good. Because then after a while, you want the ultimate end result of this is you want to remove yourself from your hands, remove yourself from thinking about mechanics, remove yourself from thinking at all, and allow yourself to do your art without having to sit there and figure out technical things. A big problem a lot of guys have, I believe, in my humble opinion, is actually we call them shoegazers, guys that stand on stage and they watch their shoes and they're thinking of what scale they're doing and thinking about what they should do next. To me, that's not entertaining, and it's not communicative, and it's not really art. It's more just on a game of Pac-Man, you can come up with enough patterns to get the high score. And basically, I guess on bass or guitar, if you learn enough patterns and licks, you could theoretically be a good player. I don't believe it actually works like that. There's some guys that don't know any of this, that don't play technically at all, that are sloppy and a mess and barely play in tune, and they're fantastic, and we love to listen to them, and they're incredibly successful. And sometimes incredibly successful internally too, because they're really expressing their art. So don't get caught up in the technology of this. Basically what we're trying to do is show you some component mechanics to help you rise above that. so that you won't be stuck in, how do I do this? How does it work? Why, you know, all these things you may be asking yourself, may be worried about. Now once you can get it and get a handle on it and get better versed with it, you can remove yourself from it and then worry about actually creating music, which again is a different thing than playing the lick. There you have it. One thing I try to keep in mind in my playing is a concept called economy of motion. What I mean by that is I try to get as much as I can without having to move my hand around a lot. I lock my hand in a position, and when it's in a good solid spot, it's kind of easier to get notes out of it from there. For an example, I do a lot of things where I bar 2 strings, and also use another finger and use this joint without having to jump around from string to string. I'm just kind of flopping this joint down on that and then lifting it up. While the first original finger stays on the first note, that stays there, and this thing will. So we get that. Without a lot of motion, I'm getting a lot of notes. Pull off it a little bit. So that's why sometimes I'll hold that on there in case I do pull up. Now, another lick you can do with that, including 3 strings, which I use often. The key of C. There's not a lot of movement. Basically, I'm just lifting up my hands, putting them down, putting that there, lifting them up, putting down. So it's pretty easy with my hand locked in this position to get a real solid, strong performance out of this without having to move my hand around and waste a lot of energy, motion, and time. Now I'll do a little different pattern. I'll go to this note here. Slow. Also, some of the notes are ringing when I'm playing, making that chord. So it kind of makes it, brings it all together because the chord you hear ringing underneath the notes. But it's just a way of getting a lot of notes without a lot of motion from your hand. Therefore, it's creating a lot of fluidity by not having to jump from place to place and maybe having a problem with your timing because it takes you time to get from one spot to another. Just one little example. Now here's another example of how economy of motion comes into play, especially with your hand locked in one position and the ability of your fingers made to play more than one note at a time without having to individually finger them. It's just a simple C major arpeggio. Now you'll see what happens there. Try to break this down in sequence. That's your first note, second. I usually pull this off just to make that easier. But you notice as soon as this finger is done with its first basic note, and it's able to let go, it's already heading towards its second position. So that's what I mean by economy of motion. Once it's done, once one finger is done with one thing, it's heading towards its next job. See the smoothness of that, just the timing of it is very easy because every finger is kind of moving in motion, in sync with each other. For the right hand, basically I'm just kind of sliding across the hand. I'm also doing a raking technique, which I'll explain. Basically, I hit a note, hit it down again with this hand without plucking it, and then I pluck the next 3, and then pull these 2, and then get the last note that way. So I'm playing. So with the right hand, I'm going. But it sounds like The raking technique I talked about is where